What's up, beautiful souls? It's a pleasure to bring to you the Spiritual Psychiatrist podcast. And there's a lot of beautiful souls behind this. And our intention is literally to give you the best information, the most truthful information that can help you in your life be 100% free physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And so that is our pledge to you. And our intention to you is to create the best possible podcast for you and to add as much value to you. And in exchange, if you benefit or if you receive value from this podcast, we would truly appreciate it if you can subscribe, share, let your friends know, because that really helps us and brings the energy flow back so we can continue to pour energy into you. Thank you so much for honoring the reciprocal energy exchange. And if this calls to you, subscribe, share, and we will continue to bring forth to you the best podcast we possibly can. If you haven't heard yet, peptides work. And it's taken me a while to really believe this, but I know it to be true now. I've witnessed so many people's lives being changed and shifted by peptides. There's 15 years of research, that I've spoken to experts that show that peptides work. But most importantly, I'm an experiential psychiatrist. And so I tried the peptides personally for myself. And I'm not talking about research peptides from China. I'm talking about real, straight made in USA from a compounding shop pharmacy, pure peptides, which are short chain amino acids. They're like little light signals in the body. And when you inject them orally or you take them through an insulin needle, it literally turns on certain pathways in your body to produce more energy, all different types of things. You can lose weight with it. You can build muscle with it. You can anti-age with it. You can grow hair with it. There's so many different pathways that peptides can turn on in the body. So I am officially a firm believer, and that's why we started LimitlessLivingMD.com, which sponsors this podcast episode. And so peptides, literally, no matter what you're trying to do in your life, health is your greatest wealth. And there's a reason why the FDA tried to ban peptides, and the reason why RFK said the first thing he's going to do when he gets into office is legalize peptides, because they work. They can help with all different types of health conditions. And we have at LimitlessLivingMD.com created a company. We want to make these affordable for everyone. Pure pharmaceutical peptides delivered straight. You can order it straight from your home. And if you don't know where to begin, we're offering a special free 15-minute consult with a peptide coaching expert who can literally get you on the right peptide, but most importantly, the right dosing. That's really important. There's a lot of people right now being overdosed on certain peptides. So the right peptide, the right dose, ordered from your home, delivered straight to your home within 3 to 5 days with everything you need to get started on the peptides. A lot of these other companies aren't giving you everything you need, and there's clear educational material on how to get started. So if this is you, you're curious about peptides, you feel called to experiment with peptides and get into your best physical health shape, there's a QR code that I've been talking on. Click that QR code, or in the links below, click that QR code for a free 15-minute consult with a healthcare expert, peptide expert, who can help you figure out which peptide is best for you, what dose to get started on, and within 3 to 5 days, if that's the route you decide to go, it can be delivered straight to your house. So I'm really excited about the magic of peptides and helping people with peptides, because it's been helping me, and I know that it can help you. So check it out, LimitlessLivingMD.com. Use the code Dr. Lee, DRLEE, for 15% off. New global paradigm of mental health. Let's go. What's up, beautiful souls? Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist podcast. Today we have a special guest with us, brother Teemu, coming all the way from Europe. He's been hosting biohacking. You might have heard this word, biohacking events, for a long time. And he all around Europe, actually. And he also has something called the Hololife Summit, which has a lot of cool technologies, which has been coming forward for humanity. It's a really exciting time. He also has a personal practice that he does, and he's been sharing all of these beautiful, amazing things with Europe and all over America, and all these people have been flying in
So I'm really excited to have Teemu here with us to share. He's written a book. He's a keynote speaker. So he's been sharing a lot of the love and light in technologies. And it's such a beautiful, fascinating time in humanity's history where all of these amazing technologies are coming forward. And so excited to have you on the show, Brother Teemu. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, Samuel.
Yeah, my pleasure as well. Tell us a little bit, Teemu, about how you got your start and your calling in biohacking, and just kind of walk us through, like, in this lifetime, how did Teemu get called into this world of biohacking?
Right. Where do we start? I think we can start from with a more of an esoteric angle to it, in a sense. So, since I was child, I have not waited because the great work needs to be done. So I founded my company when I was 16. I was a teacher in high school, and I also prepared university students. Before I went to school, I already learned the elemental table and organic and non-organic chemistry. My father and my grandfather was a chemist. There is a pharmacist in my family lineage. There's also ancestors that my father has figured out by studying the church books that were considered shamans. Now, the term shaman is something that is mainly preserved for the ones coming from Siberia, not the ones from South America or anywhere else. That's kind of almost like calling champagne all sparkling wines. So, to me, that's a pretty interesting thing, because they were on the list of 10 people from Finland, where I'm from, who were banned by the Pope from Vatican for not paying the church tax. And so they were rumored to practice some, practices, and they had strange names. The story of my life is that when I founded my first company, that was in the 90s, and the dot-com boom was coming, so I was focusing on building websites and then online services for collaborative work and learning. And I became a child prodigy in the field of learning, and I went around the world speaking in conferences and events in my early 20s on the future of education and learning, how that is becoming not something that is top-down, but from the bottom up, and how true learning is something where you're also teaching. And these are social media today in many ways. You can rise up and you can teach others. The most effective way to learn is not to read a book. It is not even to write one, but to teach your lessons and insights to others. So that's what I started doing very early on in my life. And that was pretty much from the 20s to 30s. For the work that I did on that decade, I received the Leonardo Award under the patronage of European Union and UNESCO for the work that I did in the field of education and learning. At the time when I received that award, I was already in the field of biohacking, because when I turned 30, I got some, like stress-related issues. I think when you're in your 20s, you're invincible and immortal. But as you turn 30 and onwards, you start to see that you are actually a human that will die one day, and you will see like all kinds of things popping up as you get older. And so that was a wake-up call for me. I was a startup entrepreneur, raised capital, and I was a top management consultant. I was a professional keynote speaker. I received awards for my work as a speaker, and also from the technology field and the education field. But I was pretty burned out because like opportunities kept on coming to me. Like I would speak in one event and I got invited to 3, and I never said no. And that was my journey into a very classical hero's journey, in a sense, of personal struggles, meeting your masters, and then being reborn, or kind of like phoenix bird rising from the ashes. What I've noticed about the field of health and wellness is that many of these wellness influencers, they are wounded healers, the archetype from Carl Jung. And basically, the wounded healer, one who thinks he's immortal, has a wounding experience. And that wounding experience leads you to discovering your mortality, but you get an emotional connection to the art of healing because you healed yourself. And you have this innate need to help others to not end up where you went. And so then you find people who need exactly that. And the thing is that they resonate with your wounds, and they feel that you understand them because you have been where they are now. And this is true for so many health influencers online. If you look at them, they all have a wounding story. It's very rare to have someone who never had anything. So if you look at the leading biohackers in the world, for example, many of them are talking about that I was inflamed, I was overweight, half of my brain was not working, and doctors didn't tell good news. And that was the story for me as well, because I got this stress-related illness, an ulcer, basically a wound in the stomach that was not because of infection or a viral source or anything like this. It was basically just the body's inability to recover from the burdens it had. And that led me to a doctor, and I got prescribed proton pump inhibitors that reduced the stomach acid levels. So the pain went away, and I continued, but my energy levels didn't come back. And then when the drugs ran out, I went to the doctor and they prescribed more. And that was the time when I kind of like looked at myself in the mirror and said that I'm 30, I don't want to be on these drugs. And the doctor told me that some people are on these drugs sometimes rest of their lives. So I started looking into it because I'm very analytical. I can get my head around technical things. So I went to PubMed, which is a medical database of academic journals.
Yeah.
And because I had been a child prodigy and speaking and all of that, I didn't trust gurus. I saw what gurus are, in a sense, because I was put on a pedestal, which partly is probably true, but often it's inflated. And the problem with gurus is that they start to believe their own BS. So when you say something or you do something or share some information that resonates with your audience, you start to believe you're into something, and you start to believe your own story or stories. Therefore, I didn't trust gurus, and I don't recommend anyone to trust any guru. Like, guru is basically literally a mirror. That is what it is as best. It can mirror back to you things, but you have to make up your own interpretation of that reflection. And instead of looking for one guru, maybe looking for multiple ones, but in the end, like getting behind that to get to the source of truth requires that you become one, in a sense. You become an expert in your own health, wellness, and healing. So what I did, I went to PubMed and I started studying my condition. I learned that proton pump inhibitors are not meant to be eaten for the rest of your life. First and foremost, you have stomach acid levels for a reason. Then I discovered all these other things that are linked to ulcers and gut issues. And I started just creating this kind of a database of academic journal summaries. And in the end, I designed my own protocol. And it had, if I remember correctly, 7 different layers. One of them was sleep optimization, so I should sleep more. One of them was stress management, so I should learn to manage stress. One of them was breath work to calm the nervous system, which has also, and one of them was meditation, because, well, that has, if you could look at all the studies on breath work and meditation. And if you could put that in a pill, everyone would be taking it. Another thing was exercise, not exercising too much, but like I was doing some lighter stuff like yoga and biomechanics stuff. Then nutrition, and that includes diet and supplements. My whole protocol was very comprehensive, holistic, what nowadays biohacking is in a way. And for each one of them, because I didn't see what this black box is made out of, what's happening, what actually does what, I wanted to get the data. So I started looking into wearables. I started looking into microbiome tests, into functional tests, into lab work and genetic tests. And it's good to understand that we are now talking about 2012. So the crazy thing is that 2012 was the time when I went through this transformation into this new decade of my life. And so I designed my own protocol and I started implementing it. I got the data of what I was doing. And at that time, these things were not readily available to consumers. The genetic tests just came out, the gut tests, many of the nutrition functional tests were not available without doctors sending you to a lab. I went to Estonia, one of the Baltic countries, and I went to a lab and I said, I want these tests. And they were like, what? And you give them money and they did it. And so I discovered deficiencies, and also in traditional labs, I realized like I could do better. The funny thing is that most of it was within reference range. So a general practitioner would say you're generally healthy, but I didn't feel like I'm healthy. My hypothesis was that I had created this imbalance in my system, and to restore the body's innate capability of healing, I need to restore the balance so that it has all the resources to do its work and all the building blocks for life. And so I started working on my protocol, kind of like I would say Brian Johnson, this American millionaire entrepreneur who was kind of in a similar position not too long time ago.
Don't die, Brian Johnson.
Yeah. So I had a newfound love into this, just like he has obviously right now, which is basically very fanatical. So you become like a crazy person in a way. You do everything perfectly. You aim for 100% sleep score. You're like having daily routines that are very strict, and diets and all of this. But like in the end, like this elimination diet that I was doing and all these other things combined, they caused within 3 months the remission of the symptoms. And after 4 or 5 months, I noticed that I have basically no crashes throughout the day in terms of my energy levels that I had before I got sick. So I had like constant energy. And then what happened, the summer came along and I didn't have allergies anymore to pollen. And that was surprising because I thought it's genetic or something that I will have like these symptoms all my life. I had all of those when I was a child and all the way to adulthood. Suddenly those went to remission also. So I was basically a healed man. And that time I was looking for a doctor who would understand me during the time when I was still sick. And I found from Finland this doctor called Dr. Olli Sovijärvi. And he was very popular, functional, holistic, integrative doctor. And I didn't want to go to a traditional, like mainstream practitioner. So he had like a queue of 5 months or something like this. And so I scheduled that 5 months ahead of time when I was still sick. And the time when my appointment was with him, I was already a healed man. So I went to his clinic and he opens the door and asks, okay, so how can I help you? What's wrong? And I said, Doc, like there's absolutely nothing wrong with me, but I want to tell you what I did. So that morning, before I went there, I was really considering should I go or should I not? And I decided to go anyway, although I didn't have any symptoms, and tell what I did. So I came with a big pile of paper, the research, the stuff that I did, a PowerPoint presentation. And obviously like it was new for him. patient would come like with this kind of research. So that led to a conversation which has lasted until today. And he canceled his next appointments, and I spent a couple of hours there, and he shared some of his own research. And he was a biohacker himself as well. At that time, the term was not as popular as today. And in a way, it was not what he identified or myself with. But like this whole thing of using technology, data, lab work to optimize yourself. And also what I had discovered was also more spiritual dimensions to this whole process. And so we met after that, and we decided to start writing a book together, which is the Biohacker's Handbook, which is behind me. And that's 500 pages, 550 pages, or 1,500 references, a lot of illustrations, mainly meta-studies published in the last few years when it came out. And we started working on that. That was 2013. And then that's what I've been doing over a decade now. So we have written not just that book, but many other books and ebooks and online courses. And we started organizing Biohacker Summit in 2014. Went with that for 1 decade. Last summer was the last one. We just changed the name to Hololife Summit. And Hololife is kind of an evolution of biohacking because we got tired of the term biohacking, and I can go into details why. But let's say so that you also have the opportunity to jump in, is that while biohacking is very materialistic, it's very body-centered. Like it's about the data in your body. It's about, even with the mind, it's all about brain function and performance and meditation and breath work. All of those are like turned into academic, scientific interventions and why we would do something like this with evidence. We had discovered that there's 2 really important pillars to healing, and one of those is a spiritual dimension, and the other one is the psychological dimension, which is connected very often to the way you are grown up as a child, to your parental relationships, to your friends, family, and social connections, basically. So in the end, the environment, how it molds you and shapes you, is also key here, not just your body. And so we incorporated those into Hololife, which is from Greek term, which means whole or complete. So whole or complete life. And also one thing that we grew tired of is this fanatic, like obsession to tracking and mansplaining everyone about health and wellness. And so we kind of had learned that 20% of work results to 80% of improvement. You don't need to be 100% perfect. And most people are not fanatics or like uncompromising with these things. And in the end, relatively speaking, it doesn't matter that much. You can occasionally have a bad night's sleep or stress or not so optimal diet, as long as the basic pattern that is underlying it is corrected. And often biohackers are their own enemy, because what I've noticed is that this healing process, usually they have this wounding experience and then they get super obsessed about this whole thing. That is just another coping mechanism for a much deeper underlying issue they have. So usually it's the perfectionism, the lack of feeling not enough, pushing the boundaries constantly of themselves that leads to these health issues. And then biohacking becomes just a coping mechanism that doesn't heal the underlying issues that led you to that in the first place. So it's just another control mechanism. So once you realize that, you can maybe find balance again. And I think that's kind of what I see in people like Brian Johnson, who have a newfound love to this whole thing. And I was like that 10 years ago. And well, I do look younger from the inside based on many different longevity metrics and studies. I look younger from the outside than 10 years ago. So I've gone through that path, and I recommend that to everyone. But it's kind of like learning martial arts. in the beginning, when you're learning it, you are trying to learn the forms and the katas, and you try to do things perfectly, and the master is like pushing you to be perfect. But at some point, you have to develop your own art, in a sense, and you have to start improvising. It's no longer about certain like dietary patterns every single day, repeating the same thing. It's more about contextual understanding. Just like in martial arts, when you get to combat, you have to sense what is happening, and you have to adapt and adjust your techniques and follow your instincts. And that's deeper wisdom. So it's no longer trying to enforce a protocol into your morning, into your afternoon, into your workout, into your evening routine. But it's something where you are able to adapt to the situation. So then your diet looks different, your supplementation looks different, your protocol looks different depending on what kind of day you are having, what you're going through in your life at that time, what age you are, what decade you are in your life. So these are kind of the things that I learned. And before all of this happened, in my late 20s, I went to the Amazon rainforest. And this was a calling since I was a child, like from 13 year and onwards. I got exposed to the ideas of Terence McKenna, believe it or not, and who were very appreciative of indigenous people and their practices and the mysticism around it. And so I got interested in psychedelics, but I decided not to pursue them in a Western context. So I did get exposed to the interest of a calling for ayahuasca already when I was a child, but I decided to go to the rainforest for that. And I got kind of postponing that. And part of that was because in Finland you need to go to the military when you are 19. And I was already an entrepreneur, and I sent them a letter every year that if I go to the military, I need to shut down my company. And there's this effect on laying off people and all of this. And so they kept on postponing my service until I was like 26, 27. And then I had to go. And so I had this kind of decision that I did early on that once that service is done, I will go to the Amazon. So then after that service, I did go to the Amazon, and I went to the rainforest with the Shipibo-Konibo Indians, who are most famous of ayahuasca. I would say like between the different tribes in Latin America, they are the real healers, the real masters of this. So I spent a couple of months in Peru, in the Amazon, and what happened there in 3 nights consecutive ceremonies was that on the last one, which I felt like I can't do this like anymore, like it's too tough, I did see these ancestors of mine who were on this, like from this healing path. And they told me that I can pursue the same path if I want to. And I can kind of bring back that path. And so, in a sense, I got connected to that energy. And then all this biohacking stuff happened. So it kind of made all sense now that I became kind of a modern healer myself. My tools are also plants, but based on scientific evidence. My tools are the way you conduct your life, and the magic is the technologies that I'm using. So I would say it's just the kind of implementation of the same, just in modern terms. And you can call it a techno-shaman if you want to, or curandero, but in the end you have to heal yourself first. And what is true for most of these people who decide that in an indigenous context is that they embark on a path that is very lonely in a sense. You often have to spend a year alone in the rainforest. Many people romanticize becoming a healer, but usually in those indigenous contexts, it is something that could potentially kill you if you go into that. It's not fun. It's very tough, and not everyone survives that process. And if you do, like, then you are kind of reborn into that. And in some way, like, I felt like my own journey, in a mild way, got me through similar challenges that led to my own healing and then being able to help others. And the interesting thing was I brought a painting back there. It was painted by a native, and it depicted 5 different tribes from the Amazon basin. And in the center, there's a Shipibo. And there's other tribes and traditions also represented in it. And it's been above my bed for all this time. And 2023, I got a message from someone that, hey, there's this Peruvian shaman here. Like, do you want to meet him? And I just came from travels and I was like, should I? And I looked online, who is this guy? And he's in my painting. He's in the center of that painting. And I was like, ooh. So I took that painting with me to show that to him. And he said that it is painted by his student. And it turned out that he's a 3rd generation curandero. And he learned the art of healing personally, specifically from the Shipibo Konibo. And I was like, what's going on here? This guy appears in my home. I have a picture of him lying on the bed and the painting above him, and he's using some fancy parking tech. And so then I asked him to come to our Amsterdam event, to Biohacker Summit in Amsterdam, and do an opening ceremony. And he agreed. When the day came, a couple of days before the event, I got a message that he can't board his plane because there's some name issue. So he needs to book another flight. And so he would basically not make it to the first day. He would make it to the second day. And I was like really hard thinking who would be worthy of replacing him. So my kind of right hand, Veronica in our company, like, she just said that, take some hape. That's like the indigenous tobacco. I took this hape and I asked for someone worthy to come and replace him. 2 hours after that, a Spanish-speaking woman reaches out to me. She is in the Netherlands, and she is here with the Yawanama tribe. We noticed your event. Is it okay that they come? And so they had pahe, what they call in their language, a curandero, with them. And I said, like, we need an opening ceremony. Are you interested? And they were like, yeah, we'll do it. So they did it. And the man who did it is the spiritual leader of the Yawanama tribe. His name is Painani. And he did this opening ceremony. And after that, he listened to my opening talk with a translator. And this opening talk was basically a channeling, because I didn't have time to prepare a presentation. So my tech guys just decided to generate AI images based on what I'm speaking. And yeah, I just let like stuff come through. And after that, this spiritual leader, he came to me and he offered me his feathers. And I was like, what? And then we did a closing ceremony where they very ceremonially, these Yawanao, they handed over these feathers to me. And what they spoke in microphone was that in their prophecies or traditions, there are, I think it was like thunder people who look exactly like you. And I asked him, like, why do I get these feathers? And they said, like, this happened like 40 years ago, last time this has been to. This doesn't happen often. And the feathers had been to 3 different Yawanawa before me. And I asked, like, why? Then he said, we are doing the same work that is coming from the creator. and you have to come to the rainforest and we will talk more. So he handed over his feathers. So I have these feathers that are made of a bird that symbolizes both spiritual and operational leadership. In their tradition, there is the people who kind of run the business in a way, or the tribe, kind of the CEO. That's one. And then there are the ones who lead kind of the spiritual side is another. So he had both. So he had both operational and spiritual leadership. So I got this. And so then the next day, this Peruvian curandero appeared, and he heard about this. So he decided to give me his headdress that he received from the Shibibokonibo 40 years ago when he was going through his first initiation. And this one has like very specific pattern that is not common anymore today, but the Shibi will recognize that as kind of the OG stuff. So I have now 2 headdresses of indigenous spiritual leaders. And I don't know what that means, but I do think it is not a coincidence. And the way I interpret it is it's not about me at all. Like there is nothing particularly special about me. Anyone can do this work. And the way I see it is that basically like it is happening, what is happening here is happening on multiple levels through different people. And it's part of, you can call it the ascension process or elevation of human consciousness, what you want. But we can't go to the future with the same principles or rules what got us here. We are in this kind of bifurcation point in history. We have to look things differently. And we just can't run this society and our companies and ourselves the same way that got us here. Like this has been great, like this whole industrial revolution, but we just can't go to the future with the same methods and principles. And for the indigenous people, this ancient wisdom is disappearing. The young people, only, if I remember correctly, about 20% or 30% speak even their native language. They want Western lifestyle. They want Coca-Cola, they want television, they want mobile phones. And when the internet came there, like it has become a huge problem because the daily life is no longer the same. Like they actually have to put limitations on how much people use this technology. So the spiritual leader is worried about the disappearance of their culture, that he kind of probably senses that there might be only one generation left. The thing is that they need to pass on that knowledge in some form to the new generation. And yeah, I feel like that is kind of what I need to do in some form. And the thing is that the future, the weirder it becomes, the stranger the world is, that you feel like you can't hold on to anything anymore. You can't trust anything. You can't trust things like you maybe have trusted in the 80s. Things were stable and slow moving. Everything is changing so fast. And Terence McKenna described this moment as something where it's almost like in Charles Dickens' writings, that is the best of times and it's the worst of times simultaneously. You have basically like the biggest risk for the total collapse of our world, like our financial system, our food chain, our cultures and religious borders. Everything is in chaos. At the same time, you have artificial intelligence, you have space travel, you have 3D printed organs, you have man-made biological organisms, you have like all this incredible technology, gene manipulation, you name it. And that requires responsibility for man as the Prometheus to carry the fire of humanity to the future. And the way I see it is that for us collectively to rise, like we have to be fit for carrying that fire in a way. We can't be short-sighted. We can't just think about the next election or or just this company like to exit, or whatever is the short-term vision. We have to have a much longer, wider view of how we conduct our business here, because otherwise it might be too late. We have almost destroyed this planet we are in, the ecosystem. And McKenna speaks about that this is how it looks like when a species prepares its transition to the stars. That it is the worst of times, the best of times. And he described that the universe is a novelty-generating engine, and what we are going towards is this omega point in the future that is pulling us towards it instead of us like going towards it. And so the way he saw it was that universe is not becoming, in terms of the laws of thermodynamics, something that goes towards disintegration, but actually what happens is you have this increase in novelty. And the human brain is an example of that evolutionary process going all the way back to the Big Bang. And so we live in this universe, and our brains on a microscopic level is mirroring the macrocosmos. It's as complex as the universe we are in. It's a 11-dimensional computer, according to scientists, which is our universe is, if you look at quantum physics, like depending on who you talk to, they might say there's 10 or 11 or 12 dimensions. And at the same time, we are kind of creating simulations that could simulate entirely new worlds and maybe giving birth to another universe. And that to me is a fascinating thought, kind of like the simulation theory, that we already live in a simulation, that we are here to give birth to another simulation that gives birth to another simulation that gives birth to another simulation. I see it as a fractal. I see the reality as a fractal. I see the human body as a fractal that is self-similar. So it repeats, but never exactly the same. It's like kind of like history repeats, not really, more like rhymes. So time is like that. History is like that. The human body is like that. And what is illness is loss of that structure. So when you look at someone having lung cancer, there's loss of structure. If you look at drug addict, half of their face is like hanging or melting almost. And what happens when you restore the balance and order of homeostasis, the structure comes back. And that I see is the healing process in a way. So it needs to happen on the physical, on the mental, on the social, on the spiritual dimensions of one's life. And when things are out of order, out of balance, when there's no structure, there's no algorithm, there's no beauty, there's no harmony, like that's when you see things like just getting into a place, a very dark place, but there's always a process that brings back the harmony in a sense. And I guess like that's what we need to go through as societies, as human beings in our lives. Like it's just a natural process of life. Because if everything is always in harmony, then there's no contrast. There's no growth, there's no learning. So often when people describe even a psychedelic journey or a spiritual experience, is that the best ones are the ones that are not the easiest. So usually the hardest things are the ones that make you grow. It's also the building a business or a company. When you have a lot of money and resources, that's not time when you are working in precision. That's the time when you get lazy. And the biggest lessons come when you go through hardships, in a sense. So there's nothing to be afraid of, in a way. Like it just will happen. We all will die. We all get disease in one way or another. Different lessons. And if we listen carefully, we can be reborn from that stronger than ever. And often things that we can think of as suffering is we just don't necessarily see it in the moment, but that might be the best thing that ever happens to you, that you go through those things. there's a study on Holocaust victims, and they were expecting them to have really low stress tolerance. But it turned out that they had really high stress tolerance, statistically speaking, compared to the rest of the population. And when they studied them, they discovered the ones who had the best tolerance were the ones who had accepted their past. They were not hanging into the pain. They had integrated that in a way that they saw it not something to ignore or hide, but as like part of their life and experience, and they're telling the story. And I'm like this because of what happened to me. And I think that is key, accepting things as they are and seeing them as empowering things instead of something that drags you down. So that's where I am. That was a long intro, but I guess that sets the scene pretty well.
What's up, beautiful souls? The rapid 12-strand DNA activation. Activate your inner Christos. Activate your 12-stranded DNA. All of the techniques have been split up into bite-sized chunks with homework reading assignments to help you understand the eternal life wisdom. And we've literally put this online in the Eternal Life Tribe community on School. So you're not only going to get the rapid 12-strand DNA program, and we're having people have massive shifts through this program, literally aligning you to your highest timeline, eventually aligning you to your highest spiritual destiny. And it's all online in the Eternal Life Tribe community on School. We just won the School games, which means for category self-improvement, we won the month. We had the most signups. And then not only that, our churn rate, people signing, like stopping the program and leaving, is super low compared to the normal average. So there's something that's happening on the tribe in the School program that is working, that is shifting lives. Not only that though, you're gonna get bi-weekly live Q&As with me, which means that sometimes the eternal life wisdom, it's a lot of wisdom. It blows away your paradigms. You have questions. I'm gonna be there 2 times a month to answer all of your questions, to make sure that you have the accurate information to begin remembering your 12-stranded DNA, your avatar Christos self. We also have free guided meditations, and one of the most exciting things is once every month or 2 we do powerful online breathwork sessions at home, and people are shifting, people are remembering. And once you remember and you shift yourself, then you start activating for Mother Earth, and that's starting to happen. We're starting to heal Mother Earth. So check it out. Everything that I've ever learned, there's 10 plus years working as a psychiatrist, all my favorite supplements, everything is on there. Literally the School online community, Eternal Life Tribe. Click the link below, or we'll also send you a QR code to the School community. And if that's on the screen right now, you can click the QR code, check it out. Eternal Life Tribe, School community. And I hope to see you on the Eternal Life Tribe.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so much there. Oh man, yeah, the wounded healer, your ancestors coming from Finland. Shout out Finland, because it's such a pure country, man. And I've always thought about people I've met from Finland have this like purity to them almost. And I was like, I think it's partly the water, I think it's partly the culture, I think it's partly the environment. And then also tuning into, shout out to your ancestors, especially the Siberian shamans who come from that, I think, like such a pure lineage. And they recalled you to the Amazon, and you were reconnected with them. And some Native American kind of traditions say that when the ancestors pass away, there's almost like this box, this gift of their gifts, that they can choose one of their offspring, because on some level it's all simultaneous time that they choose, oh man, this person is worthy to carry on my lineage. And they give these gifts and they leave it for one of their offspring. Sounds like you're awakening to those gifts, and you did in the Yawanawa. Yeah, and then, I love that, because it's through the psychological wounds, the wounded healer, that not only do we attract our lovers, but through that you were able to overcome through the basics, and you came back to the basics. And then you're even involving that because there was a time where you had to learn the basics, sleep, all these different things. And through that, in 3 months, your entire gut was healed, which proton pump inhibitors could not do. And they were telling you have to be on it for life. And just through that, but then even through that, once you healed through the basics, you started to realize, oh, wow, okay, if you're like too set, it's about principles. And you're too rigid, even that can lead to stress. And most of these not all, but like some of these biohackers get into that zone where they're like so set on, I got to sleep perfectly, I got to eat perfectly, I got to take my nutrition, then I got to do this. And even that can lead to stress. But just like in any good martial arts, there's like a fundamental principle behind it, which you can kind of go to, have flexibility towards. And as long as you just keep those principles, then that's going to guide and lead with the flexibility. And now you've taken that and you've integrated that since your early days, and you're evolving Biohacker Summit into Hololife, which, also touches upon the spirituality, which also touches upon the mental and the physical, how it's all interconnected through one. And leads me back to this kind of quote that you said, I think it was on your Instagram, where you were talking about behind the perfect biomarkers, which, Brian Johnson's talking about that, don't die. Let's see, eat 100+ supplements, show their nightly boners online. I like that. Narcissism, validation seeking, profound inability to discuss anything human because they're so set and stuck and trying to become this. And the whole time, what's funny to me is, because I have this myself, is what's driving this drive for perfection is that inner wounded child, which somehow in a young age was somehow wounded to believe it had to be perfect in order to receive love, or it had to be a certain type of frequency, or it had to be from the father. And a lot of our entrepreneurs, including myself, were driven towards that, including Alexander the Great, including all these amazing people in history, until you realize awareness is the first step of change. And so it says, today, Teemu Johnson advocates for psychological well-being and human dignity rather than just biological optimization. He now believes the most important metrics aren't found in blood tests, but in how we treat others when nobody's measuring. And that's the same thing that actually Jesus said, what you have done unto the least of them, you have done unto me. That was the same conclusion. And there's like this oxytocin that is released through human connection and relationships. And the master hormone, oxytocin, goes to work when there's these thriving relationships to balance out all the other hormones and all the other markers and things like that. So yeah, tell me more about, first of all, I just want to pick your brain a little bit, because the biohacking world, it's a thing and it's growing, and a lot of people, and it is important to take care of the physical body. So can you tell us, Teemu, through like your 20, 30 years of this journey, like 2 or 3 of your staple favorite technologies for the audience? And then also would love to just kind of bridge that into how you're, kind of bridging spirituality into it through Hololife Summit, and what we can look out for through Hololife.
The most common question that any biohacker who is kind of in an influential position gets is like, one, what should I do? Where should I start? Right? And the second thing is like, what is your whatever routine, morning routine, evening routine, daily routine? And the answer to the first thing, which is where should you start, is that you should examine deeply what is the biggest thing that you have a problem with. If you don't sleep enough, maybe tracking sleep. If you stress too much, maybe track your heart rate variability. If you have gut issues, make a gut test. So what works for me as a starting point is different for you. Like, you have to discover that, where you should start. And the second observation I learned from Tim Ferriss about that when I met him in Amsterdam back in the days. He doesn't speak much publicly, but I met him there when he was giving a talk. And I asked him this question: what did you learn like from quantified self-quantification, self-knowledge through numbers? And he said that in the end, the data actually doesn't matter. And I was like, whoa, the data doesn't matter? He said that it kind of guides your attention to the activity. So then I was like, wow, that's a profound idea. So it's almost like modern like path to this very moment, to paying attention to what is happening. Like Zen Buddhist monks who walk, like every day might be the same, but actually if you pay attention, there's always something different. The flowers are growing, the weather is changing. If you don't pay attention, you don't notice. So in a way, these technologies, they guide your attention to that activity. So if you have sleep problems, find a way to look at your sleep, and your sleep changes. That's the interesting thing from science, is that there's this thing called observer effect. When you're observing a light beam, for example, If you look at it as a particle, it will look like a particle. You look at it as a wave, it will look like a wave. So you are changing as an observer what is being observed, in a sense. And this is the profound thing. If you start paying attention to your sleep will change. If you pay attention to your activity and physical activity, your physical activity will change. So there is never a separation of the one who measures and what is being measured. So it's just a way of paying attention to yourself. And if you have problems on some area, you are maybe not paying enough attention, and maybe this technology can help you to do that. The second thing is that when it comes to daily routines, what is my daily routine? It's very different for you. What works for you, you have to discover that yourself. There is no perfect protocol. I mean, we can look at studies and we can look at population studies and all of this, and we can figure out methodologically the stuff that has the highest likelihood of doing something. What is kind of the 20% of all possible interventions for sleep that have the highest likelihood of doing something? Now, what I learned from tracking all these variables and doing multiple things at once, there is compound effects. It's not a single one thing. It's a combination of things that leads to a paradigm shift. So that's the problem in, like, if you look at medicine, which is very reductionist. It's like Lockean philosophy of atomizing the universe into its like smallest particles. Now, if you observe something like blood sugar regulation, or you observe something like HRV, or you observe something like cholesterol values, you are not seeing the forest for the trees. It's a complex thing. Like, the human body is a constantly evolving adaptive system. So if you focus on one marker and you change that, it changes something else. And often this change that you see, let's say high cholesterol, might be a response to something else that is going on. Because cholesterol on its own is not bad. It is a carrier. So if you have inflammation, your cholesterol goes up. If you exercise, your cholesterol goes up momentarily. Blood sugar, same way, is being regulated. And the problems in terms of health is when things go out of balance, right? So your blood sugar is like too elevated for long periods of time. That can lead to adult onset of diabetes. Now, we have these observations, but you can't observe one variable separate from everything else. You can try, but anyone who is a specialist in functional medicine knows that you can't look at cholesterol values without looking at the inflammation, right? You can't look at blood sugar without looking at if you're sedentary and what your activity is and how much you sleep. You can't look at cortisol, the hormone, the stress hormone, as something negative. Because if you don't have no cortisol, you can't wake up in the morning. You need that stuff to get going. The problem is long-term elevated cortisol levels, and at the same time also, I would say, the hormonal imbalance that comes out of it is the body's like attempt to restore homeostasis or balance. Now, okay, so if we start from the daily routine, then like, what is the stuff that has been sticking in a way? That's more interesting, like, because I've tried hundreds of wearables. I've tried like all kinds of dietary interventions and supplements. And at one point I took that 100 pills per day. I've done all kinds of stuff. What is the stuff that I find myself doing repeatedly? Now, in terms of wearables, anything that gives you feedback almost immediately is useful, because the faster the feedback loops, the faster the learning. Yes, I do have an Oura Ring and I track my sleep, but in the end, if you're able to measure something in real time and get immediate feedback, that works better. So for example, for breath work and meditation, I used EEG and basically reading my brain waves, and then a feedback through sound. So the sound would be high when I'm not so concentrated state, and it would sound really low when I am. And that helped me to learn meditation much faster than like just trial and error. In terms of breath work, heart rate variability and heart coherence was the most useful thing. So I used Inner Balance that provides real-time feedback on HRV training, and I learned to breathe properly faster than I probably would have like just doing like some kind of technique without feedback. And I had a posture sensor also at one time because I was trying to correct my posture, and it vibrated when I had a poor posture, and when I corrected it, like it was almost like a mother that reminds you to have a straight spine all the time. So these things have been most useful in terms of trackers. Then the second thing is dietary interventions. I've been using all kinds of pills and supplements, but the ones that I used repeatedly and feel like long-term I'm getting most benefit from are more full spectrum, or basically as close to nature as possible. So for example, functional mushrooms instead of beta-glucans. So I've used probably like chaga mushrooms and reishi every single day for like 15 years. Then when it comes to data and tracking biomarkers, I've done like hundreds of tests like a cancer patient. And what is most useful is just to identify the nutritional bottlenecks. So basically the building blocks that help you to recover from anything, so that you have enough vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, and correct proportions of them. That is more helpful to me than traditional labs of looking at your kidney or liver or something like this, or heart, even cholesterol values. Like more important stuff is like, do I have the building blocks that could get me out of chronic disease? Then the second thing that I would say in terms of technologies is I've used all these simulators of nature. So the view that I also do on my Instagram is that biohacks, in terms of like these futuristic technologies and interventions, are for people who live in cities, people who are not close to their ancestral roots and nature. They have something called nature deficit disorder, okay? Absence of nature in their life. So you have to reintroduce that nature by blocking blue light and using a blue light in the morning, and then filtering and structuring your water and filtering your air, and using red light panels to simulate sunset. Like all of these technologies, and if you never go to altitude, then maybe some altitude training masks might be awesome. Intermittent hypoxia training, like all these things are, if you never basically do scuba diving, maybe you need a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. So it's like all of these technologies are the most beneficial ones are just simulators of nature that our bodies have been adapted to. So I use all of these. I use red light every morning. And one thing that I do multiple times a week, I use a sauna. So I do heat alteration throughout the week. Because modern man is adapted now to, or domesticated human basically, is basically living in tropics all the time. It's steady, nice 22 to 24 degrees Celsius all the time. You are in ventilated indoors and cars and supermarkets, and you never get exposed to the elements of nature. But if you are able to increase your core temperature or drop your core temperature through simulators like a sauna or an ice bath, what you're doing, you're basically making a favor to your microvasculature. So if you look at the cardiovascular system, if you would put like the cardiovascular system in one line, it would go from here to the moon. And the thing is that the heat, what it is doing, the thermoregulation. So when you are in a hot room like a sauna, or you do exercise, your capillaries will expand to expel that extra heat, and trying to get the blood flow to the surface so you can sweat it out. When you are in a cold temperature, like an ice bath, it contracts. So it tries to bring all the energy to protect the vital organs. Now this expansion and contraction is like, it's like exercise to your microvasculature, and it increases arterial elasticity. So your veins won't become stiff like rubber band, and they will be more elastic. And that's one of the indicators of longevity as well. So I'm basically doing sauna every single day. I use an infrared sauna in the morning, which, by the way, is not a sauna. Sauna is like champagne. It's like shaman, you know. Sauna is a Finnish sauna. It has a source of heat like stove, or sometimes it's electric, and you throw water on it, usually. An infrared radiator is very different technology. It has similar effects, but there's differences. But why I use it in the morning is because it doesn't tax your nervous system as much as a traditional Finnish sauna. So I do it in the mornings. I use that as an exercise mimetic. So it mimics the same effects like moderate exercise, hormonally and biochemically. And there's many other benefits like lipolysis, so the fat tissue gets mobile, you detox, you sweat more than in a traditional Finnish sauna. But then I use Finnish sauna like maybe 2 times a week, and that's when I combine it with an ice bath. I don't recommend anyone doing ice bath every single day. It feels great, but if you are stressed in your life and you put this kind of stressor on top of that, it's like running a triathlon every day. And I've seen people getting burned out from doing too many biohacks too long, too often. One guy couldn't sleep for half a year. He was one of the leading biohackers in my country, and he just became like hyper-stimulated. Basically, a sympathetic nervous system didn't like shut off for a long time. So you can go wrong by having too much of a good thing. But in the end, like those are the things that I keep on doing. There's many other things.
Yeah, the basics once again. Well, one of the acronyms I really love is nutrition. It's called New Start. Exercise, water, sunshine, trust in your higher self, which means spending time with your higher self, fresh air, rest, and temperance or self-control, and using that as a foundation, and then kind of mimicking, especially if you're in the city, if I hear you correctly, like mimicking red light, mimicking sunlight, hot, cold, but not too often because you don't want to stress too much your body, and then mimicking exercise, the release of the biomimicry of the hormones and the blood flow, all these beautiful things. But I love that you always bring it back to balance, because too much of a good thing is also not the best thing in the long run, and it can hyperstimulate your system. Beautiful. And so I really love this evolutionary path that you're taking from biohacking, which was literally relevant to you from your hero's journey, because that's the path that you walked, and that's what you were helping people with. Now you're evolving into Hololife. So can you tell us a little bit about how this, I guess, from biohacking to Hololife, what, I know you mentioned it a little bit already, but like, what is the next stage hold for Teemu, and what can we look forward to for Hololife?
Right. So I think words are like viruses from outer space. That's a famous saying. And what that means is that if you have a word like biohacking, there's all these associations that basically lock your thinking, like you don't see outside of the box. So biohacking was needed at one time for us to break out of thinking about, let's say, alternative medicine. So if you said alternative medicine, there was all these associations, not all positive. So biohacking introduced this highly technological hacker ethic into optimizing a biological organism. And I like that. Dave Asprey, who calls himself the father of biohacking, he's not the father of biohacking as a term, but he's the father of popularizing it. And he has done a great job. And he was basically a tech guy. He was a CTO of a tech company. And so he naturally took that tech path. I'm also a technologist. I've learned programming when I was young. And I've always looked at man-machine relationships. And so for me, that was a natural term to adopt. But obviously, we are not machines, although we are kind of biological computers, but not quite so. What I find interesting is that the way we describe the brain in different decades of thought, it tends to reflect on what is the common technology at that time. So, for example, during the times of Descartes, he was looking at the human body as almost like a system of systems of these hydraulic pumps, because we were in steam engine era. So the body is like pumping things like steam around, right? So there comes the idea of the heart as a pump. It's not exactly a pump, actually, to be precise, but like that was the closest analog to understand what's going on. And then when we came to the Industrial Revolution, we started looking at the human mind as like almost like gears, right, that are turning. And very, very quickly it moved into looking at the human mind as a computer that stores things into memory and retrieves things from memory. So we have all this terminology that comes from computers, that there is like, we're transmitting information. But the thing is that when you are experiencing something, when you retrieve a memory, you are already changing the motherboard in the process. We have all these false memories. When we return something into memory, into short-term memory specifically, that we become aware of it, we are already changing the original memory in some form. So like then it's not exactly retrieving memories and storing memories, although it kind of looks like that. So I think we just have like limited terminology. So that's a long way to just say that we need a new term for biohacking so that we can kind of move outside of the terminology that is binding us to the past and certain associations and interpretations. One thing that by talking to a lot of biohackers, why people don't like that term that much, even though they are biohackers, is that it sounds dangerous. It sounds like you are hacking into something. For an outsider who never heard about it, like it sounds like something illegal almost. It's hacks, it's shortcuts. Yeah, you can kind of like see it as shortcuts, but life is not like shortcuts truly, like it's a long journey. And there might be an optimal path to take, but you still have to go through many iterations before you're a master. And the thing about that term is, like, I just felt that it's misunderstood easily. So because I believe the universe is made out of language and the way we experience the reality is kind of a language, we have to change the vocabulary, we have to change the language so that we can see things in a new way. And that's why I started searching for a new term. And then came the term holo and Hololife. So it's like the term itself, which came to me and Sean Wells, who is one of these other famous biohacker guys from US. We were in Costa Rica and we had some mushrooms and we were just lying on the couch looking at the rainforest where monkeys were jumping around, and we were like trying to come up with a term that is better than biohacking. And then like came this word holo. It's like holographic, it's holistic. So it incorporates nature and technology simultaneously. It's whole, it's complete. When you say holo, it's like it's a circle. Oh, that's what your mouth makes, like a oh. Like it's like om. It's like the first primordial sound. It's the first thing that someone says when they're born almost or die, and symbolizes community. It's also a greeting, like hello, like holo. So we were having all these like crazy associations. And later on I was thinking about what should be the next like word be with it. And I don't like health. Health immediately brings into mind disease. It brings into mind the medical system. It brings into mind dying. And it's a very loaded term. It's even more loaded than many other terms. And so although I like that and I like the term health optimization, that's very materialistic. It's very precise. We are optimizing health, but there is no it's like approaching Origo. You will never reach it. There's no optimal, and it's a constantly moving target. You reach optimal, oops, there is another optimal. So, and it's too atomistic also. It's too precise. Then when I was thinking about it, what is biohacking at its best? It's just a lifestyle. It's about life processes. So you're not going to a therapy. Why I don't like all these like biohacking clinics is that they take a very medical approach. Like you have something wrong and we need to fix you. Like it's very fear-based. The hashtag Don't Die movement, although it's a great marketing act, it's based on fear of dying. It's not based on the joy of living, although they might try to say that. It's almost like religion, the Protestant work ethic, or the Catholic Church even, which is very fear-based. You do one thing wrong and you will die. You do one thing wrong and you will go to hell. Like, that controls people. And to me, it was important to like think about it as something where you have embodied and integrated it as a lifestyle. So you don't do biohacks because you have something wrong. You do biohacks because it's a lifestyle. And it's just a way of running your operating system, in a sense. So that's where Hololife came from. Also, one thing I incorporate into it is that it's not about extremism. So you don't need to do 100% sleep score every night. Like, that's not the point. It's enough that you do something. Like, most people would benefit if you want to be on the better equation or the better side of longevity in your age group. You just do a couple of things. You sleep more, you stress less, you eat like a nutritious, proper diet, you're correcting any deficiencies. You exercise a little bit, but not like a fanatic, etc. And voila, you are in the 10% of the slowest aging people of your age group. Not hard, but most people don't do it. Most people have issues with one or more of these areas. So to me, it was important to kind of change the vocabulary so that we can contextualize this whole thing differently. And then comes the spirituality and the social aspects. I think it's really important to examine your shadow. For example, the coping mechanisms that led you to biohacking, your childhood or your ancestral traumas, the generational wounds, that if you are really looking at those things and you go deep into it, the thing about fear of something like dying is that if you try to run away from it, it's like a rubber band that just snaps you right back in. When you go into the darkest place, what you find, there's like nothing. Like there's like nothing to be afraid of. It's like a psychedelic experience. If you try to run away from uncomfortable things, it will just like keep on like coming at you until you just surrender and go into it. And what is there? There's nothing. The dark side, or, your demons, they're actually quite nice characters. If you just like go in there, they just need, some love like everyone. And then that energy will transform in a sense. So that's kind of like what I want to bring into Hololife in a sense, like awareness of these aspects. Why do we do anything? Why do we do what we do? Like, why am I actually like trying to live 180 or become immortal or have like constant energy and the best biomarkers in the world? And I think those are illusions. And also at the same time, if you go too much into that optimization, you get lost sometimes in your own narcissism. Like, it's just too focused on you. My question to many people who optimize themselves is that, okay, now you are this perfect human body. You're superhuman. Okay, great. You're going to live 180. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to masturbate on the fact that you're awesome? Or are you, and tell everyone about it and show your biomarkers? Or are you actually going to do something about the fact that you're going to live longer, you have more energy and all of this? So I think the worst leaders, we're led by the least among us, in a sense. I mean, you look at any leaders of big nation states or companies, like, they're not the people who you go to with your personal problems or issues. They're empty shells. They're experts on, like, manipulating certain things, and they probably have a lot of issues. And our society is driven by narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic leaders. The highest percentage of cluster B personality type disorders is among the most appreciated professions, like a CEO or a medical doctor, especially surgeons, lawyers, teachers, anyone who is too, like, consumed by their own greatness, who believes, like, I'm better than everyone else. I think the worst form is a spiritual narcissist. The issue with any kind of spiritual path is that if you become too focused on becoming enlightened, you maybe start thinking, I'm further than everyone else now. Or let's say you are the one who takes most psychedelics. You start to think that I see the reality better than, or more complete or more holistically than anyone else. So when you find yourself like putting yourself above everyone else in your language, in your communication, and in the way you carry yourself, I think you're masking an insecurity that is still there. So you're kind of like, what is interesting about narcissism is that it's not a strong ego. It's actually an absence of ego. Like, you haven't integrated the ego. You have not grown up. You're still a child, and you're trying to hide your vulnerability and your mortality by simulating someone else who you are not, actually. Like, what puts me off most is people who are not authentic themselves, who are trying to be something else than what they actually are. And people can sense that. They can sense and feel that you are not actually like yourself, like you're pretending to be something else than you are. And that can be quite triggering to witness. But unfortunately, those are the people who we put on pedestal on social media, in our organizations, are the people who are the biggest lies about themselves and what they're doing. The greatest company, the greatest nation, the greatest this and greatest that, like I'm the greatest, right? Look at what you can appreciate about someone truly is authenticity and vulnerability. Like, we all have experience of someone actually really coming out and saying that I was not perfect, like I failed. Like, the biggest respect I give to people in the health and wellness field is if they are able to show, and they are basically showing vulnerability. Like, I'm not able to do the diet perfectly all the time. Like, I have cravings. Like, I got ill, not hiding it. Like, I got burned out. The problem is that people try to hide those things because their identity is hanging on being perfect. And it's so hard to show that you made a mistake. But if you show that your fear that people will judge you and bring you down, in fact, you might actually gain more respect and power if you do that authentically. That's the thing. It's like, that's when people will resonate with your humanity. You're no longer just a extreme cage animal, like a simulation. You're no longer a machine, but you actually show some vulnerability, because all of us recognize that in ourselves, like, we are not perfect. And those are the kind of more deeper philosophical underpinnings in my work and in our events. What separates Hololife summits and previous Biohacker summits before it became this, people who have been to all these kind of different events, is that they feel there is less ego in the room. There's more authenticity in the room. And that's kind of the energy I try to conduct in a way, in different ways. Yeah. That you don't need to start the conversation by telling everyone how great you are, but you can actually be truly curious about who the other person is.
So much there that you talked about. And yeah, like, the greatest advice that I've ever received personally is be you. And yesterday I was actually just contemplating this, what does that even really mean? And actually this kid from Europe who was telling me, like, hey man, like, actually the word sin comes from, and I was thinking about this, is like, when you're not being you, you're not being true to you. You're just, and it's an archery term that just means missing the mark. And, and mad compassion to every single one of us, because literally, depending on where you were born, like from the young age of 0 to 7, we literally had our iPhone wide open where we were downloading subconscious programs from mom, from dad, from society, from peers, from how does this little kid receive love in the world? Oh, from my dad, I learned, when I get 100 on a test and I have to be perfect. And then when I get a 97, I get a spanking. Oh, from my mom, I learned when I dress a certain way, when I do this. And then, obviously, like, we download these programs because this little kid needed love to survive in this world. And then, obviously, by the time you're 35, 95% of everything we do is subconscious mind programming. And so I started to contemplate this yesterday. I always contemplate this, but it was like, oh, wow, it's really just about unlearning everything that I've been taught that I think I need to be in order to receive love, or I think I should be. And then, but I love, like, I think you covered this in this talk today, was like, but that was what was needed at that time. This perfection of trying to be the perfect, markers, and trying to get, because that's what drove us to this point in history. And that there was that industrial revolution, there was that, and there's cycles in life. And these cycles are mirrors to us and driving us during those past lifetimes and this lifetime into where we're headed to. And, then I started realizing, oh, wow. So when I unprogram everything I thought I should be, then I stop missing the mark. And I'm just being true to myself, including the authentic, beautiful humanity, which cries, which sometimes misses the mark. And when I do miss the mark, can I have the vulnerability to share with other people, and by doing so, give myself permission to be human, but also help other people and give them the permission to be human? And it sounds like Holo is now evolving into this, especially for 2025 to 2030, which is this, what I feel to be this really important, beautiful, we'll see, inflection point, a polarization in humanity's history, so that we can include all aspects of ourselves. And authentic expression is the resurrection if I'm just being true to who I am. So Teemu, thank you so much for the work that you've been doing. I'm sure just the beautiful path that you've taken, the hero's journey you've taken in this lifetime. Shout out to your ancestors, and also bringing together so many people through the biohacking conferences, which is now evolving into Hololife. And I'm sure there's so much beauty and so much connection and so much authenticity that's going to pour forth from your events. So thank you so much. And I mean this when I say for being born, because I really do believe on some level it's a choice, and to being born as a human being, and for such a time like this, is a really beautiful, courageous act to forget who you are so that you can remember. Teemu, where can people find you and your work and get to know and follow along with the Holo journey?
Right. So if people want to learn more about Hololife, check out hololifesummit.com. We have a Tokyo event coming up, and next year we're planning Amsterdam. There's also some plans for Latin America, even India. And
Cool.
So we're going into these emerging markets that are some of the highest growing segments of the whole wellness economy. That is now 60% of global healthcare, which is 10 trillion. So the wellness is about 6 trillion, and it is the fastest growing segments are related to biohacking and health optimization. Now, in terms of our books and all of that content, hololifecenter.com, we ship globally our books. You can get it in electronic format or physical copy. I'm working on now a book series that basically crystallizes this whole Hololife concept. It's a 4-book series. The first one is called Resilient Being. The second one is called Vital Being, which is a longevity book. Third book is called Mindful Being, which is about the mind. And then the fourth book is called The Transcendent Being, which is about transcendence and spirituality. And that's where I integrate technology in it, because I do believe artificial intelligence is not an enemy. It's a reflection of collective consciousness. It's the closest we have as a mirror. And I do see that evolution of men and machines, the distinction between technology and nature, is coming into one through AI. And I can talk about that more in some other episode. But I do thank you so much for giving this message a space to get out there, and recognizing it and honoring it. And if people want to follow me specifically, I do a lot of philosophical posts contemplating different aspects into this holographic universe, and that you can find at Teemu Arina on Instagram.
Beautiful. And we'll link Teemu's Instagram in the show notes, so follow along with Teemu. Teemu, it's such an interesting time in humanity's history. I want to close it out with if you had a New York Times billboard and all of humanity was tuning in right now for 2025 to 2030 in this really interesting time in humanity's history, what message would you want to get out to humanity right now at this particular time?
You are not a human being, you're a human becoming. And Hololife, it's more than life. I think what is key is that you never let your schooling interfere with your education.
And so it is, every moment. Thank you so much, Teemu, for joining us on this episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist Podcast. All right, beautiful souls, have a beautiful week. We will see you next time. Love, light, peace, and truth to all sentient beings. Peace.